Hey guys, would you like to know an unusual way, but quite an interesting way to deal with the Sicilian defence? One that has allowed me to win quite a few nice games in blitz chess and even win a game on a way to my final Grandmaster norm. Well, it's a system against the Sicilian that, if you like systems such as the Grand Prix attack or the line setup, and you want to go your own way early in the opening, I think you'll find the move Bishop e2 to be quite an interesting choice. The thing with Bishop e2 is it is a kind of flexible move in a way where, well, what do you think might be the sub that we would play here as white? Well, basically we're going to play f4, knight f3, d3 and castles, and just develop our pieces in a very healthy fashion. Now you might be wondering why exactly don't we start with f4 in this position and just, get f4 in right away and maybe put our bishop on a better square than e2? Well, that has a little bit of a catch in that you can actually play d5 as black, and that's a somewhat annoying line in my experience, because if you take, black's not forced to take and have their queen get kicked all over the place, but they can actually play knight f6, and I find that this gambit is a little bit of a nuisance for white in terms of setting problems to the opponent. If white does try to hang on to the pawn, well, we have a very nice gambit with e6 where, I don't know how many of you know the Icelandic gambit, but we essentially have a vastly improved version of that opening as black, because white weakened his structure with the move f2, f4. While white does have some weaknesses on the d file that we've clamped down on with c5. And it's just a lot easier for black to get his pieces out simply in this kind of position. So therefore, with bishop e2 we're kind of preparing f4, where let's say if they play knight c6, which is the most common move here, you can go f4, and now d5 I think is not quite as effective as it was beforehand, because after e takes d5, well, in that case they can't just play knight f6 anymore because of the knight being under attack. So they go queen takes d5, and okay, in fairness, probably white doesn't have much of an edge in this position, but it's definitely one where white's plan is relatively apparent. Let's say if black plays knight f6, here we go knight c3, queen d8 might be played, and we can even think about moves like knight e5, just ask him how they will deal with the knight being under fire here. And we can continue by getting our pieces out with d3 and castles, for example. So it's definitely, I should add, we might put the bishop on f3 as well. So it's definitely a system that white can play, and we don't have to worry about them making an early attack on our position or something like this. Now, most people, when they're facing anti-Sicilian, they like to go for some sort of queenside fianchetto setup, something like this, where they can just get the pieces out and claim equality. But there are a few tricks up white's sleeve if black does go g6, where I find that white has generally scored pretty well in practice from these positions, at least from my practice, where you just have this very easy system where you just castle and sort of keep your structure very flexible. And indeed most people will play d6 and continue with their setup as such, just going for castling. But there are a few different ideas with which we can try to attack their king. In fact, I remember McShane had a very nice win against Cheparinov many years ago, where he just castled and brought the queen to h4. And perhaps objectively it's not the best continuation, but in a blitz game we could certainly imagine white getting in a very nice attack in the style of the Grand Prix with a thematic f5 pawn sacrifice. And if they were to play bishop g4 to try and bring a bishop to defense, that's actually the most common move, but I think if you play c3 and don't let their knight into d4, then I actually think white could have a little bit of an edge even in this kind of position. So yeah, it's something that is worth keeping in mind, that in practice people often don't meet this system in the best way because they've set slightly different problems to what they would in an open Sicilian or even most of the other anti-Sicilians. Let's say if you want to play it more positionally, well, you can play c3, which was also my choice in this position in a couple of games. Where after castles you have a few options. I think most of the strong players, from what I remember, like to go knight a3, but perhaps now they have switched to playing king h1. And, well, I might ask a question if we're not going for the kingside attack with queen 1 to h4. What might be white's plan here instead? I'll give you a minute to think about it. So, it turns out actually b5, after b5 for example, we can actually play us up with bishop e3, knight bd2 and d4 and try to get a big clamp on the position. Let's say we go a3 just to slow up their b4 play a little bit. They might go a5, and here we can sort of see why we played king h1, because we want to make sure we have this square tucked away for the bishop if they go knight g4. And if they play bishop d7, it's no problem. We go knight bd2. If they play rook b8. Okay, what's the move that we've been gearing up to play this whole time? Can you tell me? Very nice. We're aiming to go d4, and, well, this is not called the big clamp for nothing. We have a very nice sort of clamp on the centre. And I'm not saying that white's necessarily better, but I think practically speaking it's not so pleasant for black to have to play against the large amount of space we have here. And I think in practice it would be easier to play white because of our space advantage. You know, if they play e6, we have various improving moves like rook to c1. We can bring our bishop around maybe. Even bishop d3 makes some sense actually. So it's a position I'd be happy enough playing as white, though objectively I'm sure black is absolutely fine here. So that's one option. You can also put the knight on a3, and you can support your centre that way with rook b8, and for example you can end up putting a knight on c2 and having this solid position. Though again, it has to be said, black probably is doing fine by putting pressure on our c3 pawn. So yeah, you're not going to get an opening advantage with 2 bishop e2, but it can lead to a sort of fresh sort of game where you have some scope to outplay the opponent and, you know, make them think on their own at the start of the game. Now, there are some other setups they can play. For example, they might play e6 and then play for d5, which is, I remember how Anton played against me, Anton Smirnov that is, where after knight e7, try to remember what I did now. I think I played c3, and after d5 I think I ended up playing for e5 at some point, but I didn't do it just yet because I didn't want to give the f5 square for the knight. If I had this position now, I think I would play the move bishop e3, and if b6, then maybe I would play a move like e5 or maybe bishop f2 first, just so knight f5 doesn't later come with a tempo. I mean, this sort of position is again one where, yeah, I don't think white's objectively better, but you are asking a few questions where you do have that space advantage. If they let you, you can play d4, say f6, and I think d4. And this sort of structure, I think, would be a little bit better for white. You know, we can kind of see that if these pawns do get traded, that we just have this permanent space advantage that's not really running away. And we can kind of put our pieces on healthy squares from there, just playing normal chess. So they probably should play d4 and not let us get that get this d4 break in. But we can sort of see that this pawn on d4 can be a slight target. Again, I'm not saying that white is better here, but again, we have a clear plan of putting pressure on this pawn. Maybe our knight can also try and jump into d6 if black gets a bit careless. So there's, again, definitely scope to outplay the opponent from this kind of position. Let's say they try a different setup. I know black often like to play this d6, e6, knight e7 setup. Yeah, it has a very harmonious feel. So after bishop e3 and castles, well, what do you think is a good move for white? Let's see if you've been a good student through this lesson. Okay, so about to reveal the move, and the move is d4. This is the one that I really like. Because you think about, we've been trying to play d4 in the last so many positions, just trying to build up that nice clamp. And black's best move might actually be f5, trying to get the d5 square for our knight. But I don't think anyone's actually played that way, to my knowledge. What most of them do is they take on d4, and then they play d5, and that doesn't work so well. White just has this very nice space advantage, and you know, black will kind of sit here wondering, well, how did this go wrong? and it's just that he went for the wrong plan of cd4 and d5, when in fact he should really play f5 and secure the d5 square for knight if he wishes to fight for equality. So it's sort of the idea with this system that, perhaps black's objectively fine, but at least they have to have a good understanding of what is going on. And if they haven't faced this sort of system before, it's not that likely that they will pick up that understanding just in 1 minute in the game. They can also play e6. There's definitely a system that has a right to exist, just playing it like a French defense. I mean, that is probably one of the best options for black, where after d3, if they go g6, bishop g7, it's a little bit like we've seen before. So they might put the knight on f6 instead. But white usually does pretty well in these positions, where, perhaps this position could be a decent test. I'll just throw in castling to make it a bit easier. If you have this position, what do you think is the pawn structure white should be aiming for? I'll give you a moment to think about it. So in this position, you can play c3 and d4. There's nothing particularly wrong with this plan. But I think it's very interesting to play c4 and try to pressure them in this way, because now you have a bit of a space advantage in the centre. After castles and knight c3, and this slightly unpleasant choice, where if they go d4, we have our knight in the centre, and f5 is a little bit loosening. Or let's say if f6, then f6 is actually what most people play in practice, but it's probably not the right move. Should probably go for queenside play and maybe try to equalise that way. Because after f6, there we go. After f6, well, you can sort of say that black's structure is a little bit sort of loose here. Even if we play, say, knight g5 and try and manoeuvre our other knight to e4, it feels like white's position almost plays itself. Our pieces just naturally go to the right squares. And I think it's not as easy for black to kind of find that same sort of simple scheme that will just allow them to equalise. They really have to find quite a concrete way to deal with our plan just grabbing a lot of space. Now, there are other options as well. I mean, if they go d takes e4, personally I was never really afraid of this ending. Always felt that white should be a little bit better with his extra space. Now I'm a little bit wiser, and I do think objectively, if black plays, say, b6 and develops a queenside fast, then I don't really see why black should be worse, objectively speaking. But it does seem a bit easier for white to play, where white actually scores extremely well in practice from these sorts of positions. Either go knight to... I was thinking bishop b3, then knight d2, but maybe knight d2 is a bit more secure. And it's equal, but I think it's easier to play white because of your extra space. It kind of reminds me a little bit of this unrelated variation where, in this sort of d6 system, at a club level you see this line with d takes e5 quite a lot. And perhaps from a computer perspective it's not such a terrible move. But it's sort of just a lot easier to play black. You kind of have your system that you play, where you can sort of just put your pieces on natural squares. Black has his space advantage. And it's just not that easy for white to kind of, find a similarly logical plan. It's just much easier to improve black's position than white's. So basically, that's kind of what we're aiming for with, let me find the position. With this sort of endgame here, it's a very similar sort of position we've created with white. Where maybe it's equal, but it's definitely easier to play white, as the results bear out. Also, bishop d6 is a move that has a right to exist. I mean, probably black is just fine here. But we do have ideas where we might play, let's say, c3 and try and go e5 and d4. And, well, it's still an equal and very meaty sort of position. If they do stop e5 with f6, I think that gives us scope to just revert to the other plan, and we can even go g3 and just sit on the position and see what happens from here. Castles and knight bd2. And okay, I think it's just an equal position at the end of the day. So, in any case, I'll see if there are any other lines that are worth mentioning. Well, they don't have to play knight c6, that much is true. I think d5 is probably a little bit too early, and that we can probably just take... And we kind of get our pieces out very fast with knight c3 and castles, and if they let us, we probably will push with d4 in the centre. So I think that gives us pretty decent chances of an edge. They can also try other setups where, for example, they can try to do about knight c6. They might try e6 and, if f4, maybe something with d5. But I think that's quite likely to transpose to lines we've been looking at, because it's sort of hard to see where a knight goes if it doesn't play to c6. So if they do play d takes, it's kind of a bit like what we've seen before, but maybe it's a better version where there's even this funny idea where you might put your knight on f2 rather than f3 in some cases to keep your e-pawn well protected. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting way to play it. If they play d6, again, it's sort of hard to see what they do if they don't play the move knight c6 at some point. They could play g6 and bishop g7, but in sort of not playing this knight c6, they're only really giving us extra options with d4 in some positions. And if castles, then if knight f6, I mean, we're kind of just transposing to the other line, where, I think on the next move it's hard for black to do without knight c6 anyway. So we can play our c3 or our queen e1, depending on whether we want to go for the king side attack or for the big clamp as such. Those are the two main plans you should know as white. So yeah, I think that covers just about everything with this system. Just to recap our knowledge to make sure you've understood everything. In this position here, can you tell me what the two main plans are for white? It's okay, very good. We have the plan of the king side attack. What's the other plan for white in this position? Yeah, well done. You could go for c3 and try and get your big clamp of having the pawns in the centre. So with these ideas, I think that you have pretty decent chances of obtaining an advantage out of the opening. Excuse me, just go back to where we were. I'll just draw those plans just so you can see how they play out. So yeah, basically that's how the bishop e2 against the line against the Sicilian works. It doesn't really have a name, but I just call it the big clamp because it's kind of easy to say. And well, as you get more experience, you might even diversify and maybe use this move order, for example, with f4. And something like this can, for example, be another way to, to reach this sort of opening. So it's the idea. You can even play a few different move orders to try and trip up your opponents. So yeah, that's that system. I hope you found this video useful, and I wish you all success playing bishop e2 in your own games. So see you in the next video. Bye bye.